John Carnegie is from Energy Resources Aotearoa. It is to do with what would appear to be a energy resource problem, depletion problem in this country. It's a very cold winter throughout most of the country. It's been one of the coldest on record. Electricity supplies are under question. And that's made us question that if we're struggling to handle the winter of 2024, how are we going to handle the future when we're meant to be carbon free by 2050 and made huge gains in terms of renewable energy in the next 5 to 10 years? Joining us to talk about that is John Carnegie, the Director of Energy Resources Aotearoa. John, thank you for holding on. Been a very interesting 24 hours, hasn't
it? Good morning. Yes, indeed it has.
Listen, mate, you used to be New Zealand Oil and Gas, didn't you? And then changed your name. Is that right?
No, we used to be a group focused on oil and gas producers, and now we're an energy system-wide advocacy group.
Okay. And so you represent who?
Well, it's a more easier question to answer as to who we don't represent. We represent oil and gas producers. I talk about the well-to-wheel. We represent oil and gas producers through to electricity generators, electricity distributors, gas distributors, major gas and energy users, OG, Methanex, for example, and down to Mobil, New Zealand.
Okay. All right. So it would be fair to say that you would represent traditional users of energy in this country.
Yeah, exactly. And the emerging.
And producers. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And the emerging ones.
So this government's come in with an agenda that we don't have enough energy to meet our supplies in the future. One of those things that we need to do particularly is get gas back into the equation. On this program for months now, the chair of New Zealand Wind Farms, Craig Stobo, who's now become head of the Financial Markets Authority, has been on the show saying that that's right, we need gas. It's going to have to get us through to wherever we want to go in the future. But one of the questions that a lot of people have asked on this show, and you might be able to help us with, John, is we used to have a lot of gas. We'd identified where it was. We reticulated into New Zealand homes, and it was plentiful and going to be there for, well, near enough to ever. What's happened to the gas industry? Why isn't it plentiful and available? And where do we go from here?
Yeah, well, they're great questions. Well, what's happened to the oil and gas sector, and particularly the upstream producers, is the oil and gas ban. And, you know, oil and gas is also rather difficult to find, but when you overlay a ban that prevents, I mean, just like any business, actually, they need to continue on to keep running. When you short circuit that and introduce a ban, then you are hardwiring in a closed system, and investment gets tough to make. And so you've had the ban, we've had effectively a 6-year gap in new exploration. So during that time, in fact, before that time, we had 25 or so explorers in the country, and after the ban, I think now we've got 9. So that tells you that investors have fled New Zealand. The market conditions are far higher, and we also now have remaining fields that are all nearing end of life. And I guess so. You've got a particular circumstance around the introduction of the ban, but then of course, over the course of the last 5 or so years, 6 years, you had a bunch of other policies that were also aimed to negatively impact on the gas market. You had Onslow battery project, you had changes to the RMA that made consenting fossil fuel equipment much harder. You had 100% renewable electricity target. You had state subsidised demand destruction. And of course, to cap all of that off, you had the incredibly onerous decommissioning rules that were introduced. So when you layer all of that up, you have a particular dynamic left in the market that says it's really hard to produce gas. And so on top, I guess all the MB data that came out last week is just the reporting of that. It's basically saying we've got a decline in gas reserves. And when they talk about gas reserves, they talk about two things. They talk about what the producers think they know is there and what can be produced or delivered. And how they figure that out is a mixture of economic and technical factors given each field. But what we're seeing is a dramatic year-on-year decline in both of those.
Despite the fact that this government has reversed that ban and said off you go again for New Zealand and gas, I'm picking that if I was an international, if you like, explorer of those sorts of resources and sought to make some form of economic investment in discovery, and then obviously in supply, I've got such an unstable political environment in this country that I couldn't be assured of continued economic favour. Would that be fair?
Yeah, look, I think it's going to be two things in there, Michael. The first is that the oil and gas ban actually hasn't been reversed yet. So yes. The government has announced it's going to do it, and that they're going to do it sometime in this half of the year. Frankly, we think it can't be done quick enough. Yeah. Along with some other stuff. You in your intro, you want to talk about winter 24 and winter 25. I mean, I don't think there's virtually no chance now, even if the government reversed the oil and gas ban now, that the sector can ramp up to help for winter 25. So it's going to be a tough energy security winter, I would have thought. But in terms of will we get investors back, I think what you've touched on there is this concept of, it's called sovereign risk. And I kind of joke, I'd kind of say, look, New Zealand's always been gas prone. We've been known as a jurisdiction with plenty of gas, which actually isn't necessarily a helpful thing because you also need to find condensates with the gas to make the economics work. But we've been known as gas prone, and now, unfortunately, we've become politician prone. And so I think the issue there, and it will be the question, and certainly the question that I'm being asked, and it will be the first question that the new minister is asked, is what can he do to avoid a policy flip-flop in, let's be optimistic, 9 years' time?
Yeah.
Maybe 6 years' time. That is the question. And of course, that even impacts the current producers, because of course, if we're going to get gas quickly, it will have to come from the incumbents. And even they are asking, well, we could start drilling more wells, but if we find another large resource, what will happen if in 6 or 9 years' time we get someone who A, wants to introduce Onslow, B, wants to, so basically going back to the old policies, B, wants to make fossil fuel technology harder to consent, reintroduces 100% renewable electricity target, reintroduces GIDI, that's the state, I can't recall what it stood for, but it was the state subsidised demand destruction, reintroduces onerous decommissioning rules. So all of that, we've got a massive overhang on the sector, and that's the question that people and new investors and existing investors are going to.